This is Axis and Allies on the 2LS channel, and I'm showing off my Chinese cavalry units. Didn't have any guys on horses, and for Chinese tanks I am using my dog team. Yay! I finally found a use for them. Now, why am I showing you this? Well, this is Axis and Allies G40, but we're playing with the Sire Bloods BBR rules. BBR 3 is what I'm using at the moment, and I should get into that in a little bit. Before that, I should mention that I make these videos in aid of a charity called Cure Parkinson's. You can guess what they're trying to do. There is a link to them below this video and one in the banner on the channel page. If you happen to have a spare dollar, euro, yen, yak or an IPC you could send to them, I'm sure that they would appreciate it. Now, let me start off by saying to you what this video is not. It is not an instructional video, it's not tactics or things like that. It is purely to show off, promote, pass on to you this double-sided A4 crib sheet that takes you from G40 into BBR 3 in this case. It can be used on other versions, I'm sure. There may be little tweaks you might have to do, pencil them in, whatever. Reason being, Sire Blood made BBR. Done a great job of it, and he's made some good videos. G.I. Joe, he's done some videos. I'm grateful for them for making that effort, and I've taken what I can from there. I've also had to be texting and messaging friends of mine, Hell on Wheels and Corporal Clegg. I should put links to everybody down below this video so you can check out all those guys as well, because there's been some questions arising because the BBR rules and the G40 rules don't necessarily marry up in a perfect fashion, and I find with all the different versions, I've got about 13 versions of Axis and Allies, they've all got subtle differences, so I've got crib sheets for them all. I would suggest you if you're changing over from G40 into BBR 3 and back again, because it's not the be all and end all, it's a good version BBR, but if you're changing over, have a quick scan through this to remind yourself of the rules and then get back on and play, and that you might have to keep it to hand for later on. But there are quite a few subtle little changes. I shall split this down into about 6 screenshots. They will all fit very readably onto double sides of an A4, so print it up, laminate it if you want to, whatever else you want to do. I shall now go through these rules slowly, carefully, quietly, in my own rambling fashion to you, as I like a good ramble. You might find that if you're doing the dishes or you're painting some pieces, you can stick this video in the background and try to absorb some of those rules by osmosis, because sometimes when you're looking for these odd rules, it's you know you've read them somewhere, you can't quite remember where you've read them, or did I interpret that right, or was that in a dream? But I've tried to include this section down into sensible places like land, sea, air, territories and powers, because they're the different subtle changes, and I've put the reference to them to the pages you should be going to as well in the BBR book to just double check that out. If you want to stop here and just take the screenshots, then be my guest. Other than that, I should just have a little ramble through it in my own dulcet tone. Well, the game has moved on quite a bit from the introduction video. We're past the finishing point of the general game. We're on to round 12, but I really want to see how this works out for the Allies smashing their way back into France. I always like it when the Allies do that. Germany have smashed their way through to to almost doorsteps of Moscow. Barbarossa coming back to the fore, and the Allies are trying to hold on to these overstates, massive German tanks here with super tanks. They're all rolling in at 4 or less, which has been a real great fun battle. And the Chinese, well, they've done some great jobs here. As you can see, there is no Japanese left on the Chinese mainland or in the game. Americans come through and finish those off in a wonderful, wonderful battle. I did enjoy that. But let's get back to what I was going to do, which is read through this sheet slowly and in a nice, gentle fashion. So, we start off with some of the units which, the artillery. These artillery units that would, generally speaking, get a tech upgrade from the G40 in this version of the game. The tech upgrade not only gives them the ability to support 2 infantry units as they would do in G40, but they can blitz with tanks and they get 2 movement. That's quite important. That gives them a heck of an extra kick. And obviously for the BBR, where you've got less rounds, you want to move things forward quicker, then that is a good idea for those if you've got that upgrade. Let's go with the anti-air. Now, anti-air can attack units that fly over territories. So I'm assuming that if this was in Malta, as it is, a plane that flies over and tries to attack Malta, you would normally get to shoot at the plane. If, however, this anti-aircraft was in Libya and the plane was coming over Libya to hit Tobruk, then this would get a chance to fire at it. Now, the rules do say that it applies to planes flying over territories. So I'm assuming that the AAA on battleships do not get to hit things that fly over sea zones. That, I think, is quite an important distinction. Also, with the AAA, you can non-com move them. That's pretty much standard. But going back, sort of harking back to the classic versions, you can also abandon them if that was going to be the case. If you've got an abandoned territory that gets invaded, the anti-aircraft will be taken over or captured by the capturing power. Obviously, battleships have AAA. That's quite important. We'll come to that later on. But the AAA on battleships and in a territory will negate target select. We come to target select later on as well. That's a new thing in BBR and a very good idea. So the next thing that we have here will be blockades. It's on page 27 of the rule, but let me just move over to here. It's not really going to be able to demonstrate a full thing for you because it's a bit more complicated than I want to go through when just reading the rules out to you. So a surface warship, not a sub, may block the movement of up to 3 opposing warships. The blockaded vessels, that's the ones that got involved in that blockade conflict, would remain in the sea zone after conflict, successful or otherwise. But if it's a successful attack, then the attacking power, the one that's trying to get through the blockade, can then move their assigned units through that blockade onto their destination. A surface warship, not a sub, with an attack value of more than 1 or 1 or more, is necessary to escort a transport ship through a cleared blockade. That's one to remember, I think. Battleships themselves, page 43, have AAA. That's good. They a plane coming in, they can knock them out of the sky with 1 attempt at AAA. It works in the same way as your normal ground-based AAA. Battleships combined with the cruiser will give the cruiser a defensive roll of 4. That's up 1 from its normal 3. And as I understand it, the cruiser will maintain its defence of 4 even if the battleship is damaged. Now, a damaged battleship, in this case, on a damaged aircraft carrier, they will move down the battle board. But apparently, the cruiser will remain at its boosted amount if it's got the battleship in the same sea zone with it. Capital ships that haven't been given one of the tech upgrades, they will attack defend and move at 50% if they're damaged, and they can't offshore bombard as well. Other sea unit changes is transports. 2 transport ships in one sea zone will give one of those ships a defensive role of 1. They cannot attack unless they are accompanied by another unit with an attack value of 1 or greater. On to submarines. Submarines can target select now, page 31, on each round of combat. It's different for submarines with their target select as it is with tactical bombers. Tactical bombers are the only other unit which gets the target select in this game, but submarines can target select on each round of combat, provided there isn't a opposing destroyer in that same sea zone, because destroyers will negate the target select of that submarine as it would do with the first strike capabilities. It's part of that first strike situation. Target select is only open to the attacking submarines as well. Okay. Also, if a submarine chooses to submerge, it will remain submerged until that power's next repair units phase. So the start of that power's next round. So they can't just bob down and come up again for a different sortie or different attack later on in that round. I've included kamikazes, which 1 second. If you remember, I have some absolutely superb kamikaze units which fly into different regions and did a superb job in this game actually in defending the Japanese waters, although they were fighting a losing battle there. But there is a difference to the kamikazes, and the reason why I've got the kamikazes in this sea unit section is because, well, kamikazes only really defend in the sea areas. There's a change to when they can come in and be used. It's if one island, the Philippines, Marianas, Okinawa, Guam, Iwo Jima, has been recaptured or captured, or the Japanese territory income, not their total income, the territory income is 36 IPCs or less, you can then use kamikazes. You can't just use them willy-nilly. Other than that, we get on to air units. Strategic bombers are only used in the first round of general combat. And their normal attack, that used to be at 4 or less, is now 2 at 2 or less. And then they must withdraw or be taken as a casualty. Their defensive role remains at a single dice of 1. It was argued on the Facebook page when I was chatting to some guys about it that it makes them very weak. And, well, I think actually it kind of... two rolls at 2 or less is the same as 1 roll at 4 or less, odds-wise. But if you get that 1 success of a 2 or less, you've got an extra chance of a second unit being damaged. Now, they can't keep, obviously, reloading in mid-air and then dropping again, as they could do in regular G40, which did make them slightly overpowerful, especially if you had that ilk of just buying bombers only and making a real... I think a sloppy game, really, just to buy bombers and keep bombing everybody at 4 or less. So I think it's a very sensible rule and a very interesting rule as well. And a lot of battles that you're going to be doing here aren't going to be massive attacks over multiple rounds. So that 1 round attack by the bombers does actually make a lot of sense within this game, and I have at times chosen to keep them in there and use them as casualties because we needed the ground units in place. So it is interesting that you must either withdraw them or use them as casualties. That adds a little bit to it. There is a massive change to the strategic and tactical bombers that are done on facilities, ICs and factories. It's on page 28, and there's a little list included on this crib sheet of the damage numbers which they can do to the facility. Also, with those, going back to those bombers, they can be used as transport. A bomber, reclassified as a transport plane, may move 2 infantry to another region with its normal flight capabilities. If it's upgraded to a heavy bomber, it can be classified as a cargo plane, and it can move an infantry and a tank or a mech with one infantry unit, or an artillery unit as well, sorry. So it's got that capability of moving some heavier pieces in. Now, when they're going into attack and using it as a combat drop, so it would be on a combat movement, you can't drop more units into that region than were going in on the ground. So if you've got 2 ground units, you can put up to 2 air dropped units. If you're using these planes as cargo or transport planes in a non-com movement, you can then put 2 units into a territory with that cargo or transport plane. It may land in that region because it's going to be non-com, it's a friendly region, or it can actually continue its transport afterwards to go back and pick up some more, presumably. But onto tactical bombers, same as those submarines, they can target select, but only during the first round of combat. Whereas the submarines can target select during multiple rounds, provided there's no destroyers in there. The tactical bombers, if they use their target select, they would lose their combined arms bonus that they would get with fighters being in that region, and they would lose that combined arms for the whole of that battle, though they would only be able to target select on that first round. And remember that AAA would negate that target select anyway. And again, target select is only open to the attacking power. It's only the attacking tactical planes that can fly in and target select, not the defending ones. AAA will negate target select. That's including the battleships AAA. Tactical bombers cannot target select other air units or transport ships or submarines, even with an attacking destroyer present. Next we move on to territories. Integrated railways on page 37. Operational, friendly, major and minor industrial complexes may rail units beginning their non-com movement in that territory up to 3 spaces. And it's the number that you can move is limited by the IPC value of that territory. And obviously you've got to be sensible and think about it. You cannot move over, into or through canals, passes or enemy territories, and you cannot rail into newly liberated or captured territories either. This is a non-com move. The Trans-Siberian Railway, which is the one which I've got right up there, made very beautifully on my G40 map by using some pieces of cable tie, which I managed to bend around and stick together. A little bit of paint to give some ballasty colour. It's not a rule-breaking addition to the game. The Trans-Siberian Railway, only the Soviets can use it, and only the Soviet units made non-com a single unit along that route. It must begin and end its move in a territory containing a Trans-Siberian Railway. Now I emphasise the non-com because it's not very clear in the rules. However, if, say, the Soviets were trying to move one of their units into Amur, right up there, and Amur had been taken by the Japanese, you couldn't move into it anyway because it's owned by another power. So therefore it has to be a non-com move. That's my interpretation of it anyway. Let's try and pronounce this properly. The Tian Kunlun Shan Pass, forever known as the TKS because I can't pronounce it properly. This is this pass here. It used to be the Himalayas, just here as an impassable region. In the BBR rules, it stretches right up and has different rules applying to this northern section up here. Again, look in the rules to make sure you know what can move and where it can move. But strategic and heavy bombers only can fly over that pass. And only infantry can move into this northern section. You can't contest it. You can't have a battle in there. You can't own it, anything like that. But only infantry can move through these little gaps here. And obviously, in the one that I made, because I'm into this sort of thing, I've got little passes to go through these 3 sections to show where you can go to and from. That's just me being like a 5-year-old again, but I enjoy that. We go on to the last couple of sections now. Well, the last section is actually power. Now, Germany, if collecting 53 IPCs from territory income, they will trigger the Argentine and Chile rule. So just be careful as you're collecting your income there. The Soviets get a lend-lease system on page 19. When they collect their income, check for the Soviets lend-lease, because they get a little bit of help from possibly on either side of the map, either in the Pacific or in the Atlantic side. They can get units, they can get some cash. It's a good idea. Mobile production as well. Now, mobile production applies only again to the Soviet Union. If they are at war with Germany or Italy, during the purchase units phase, the Soviet Union may move a minor industrial complex to a legal adjacent space. It would cost them 2 IPCs to actually move their factory backwards, and they would reduce production by 1 unit during that term. But it makes perfect sense. It is what the Soviets did during the early part of the 1940s, is they were moving their unit away from being grabbed by Germany, moving it back up into the Urals and Novosibirsk and so on and so forth. So when it came to 44, was it, with the Operation Bagration, where the Soviets swept back through into Germany, they surprised Germany with how many units they had managed to produce on the QT. So this rule reflects that, and reflects it very, very well. It's a rule that I have used a couple of times in trying to move things back, and it's a very effective rule as well, and I think a very sensible change. The US do get their free industrial complex upgrades when entering the war in the 1914 starting version of this game. They start off as the same as G40. It doesn't mention it in the BBR book. You have to refer back to the G40 book. It does say very clearly, that the BBR isn't trying to override; it's augmenting. But sometimes you're flicking backwards and forwards, and you're thinking you're looking in one book, and it's in the other. China. Interestingly, as we showed slightly at the beginning of this game, they get 3 cavalry units, which is my Chinese guys on push bikes. Oh, that fell over. And they also will get 2 tanks, my dog team tanks. It's a maximum of 2 tanks per game. It's maximum of 3 cavalry units on the board at any one time for the Chinese. So important differences there. There's also some augmented places that China can go into more than the G40. Burma, Shan State, Siam, Malaya, French Indochina and Kwangtung are available. I believe they couldn't get into Burma or Shan State before. Italy can switch sides, and I think in this game they're very much thinking about it. However, the tactic has been, as you might be able to see by these French destroyers here and some British destroyers here, what the Allied have been doing actually here has been denying IPCs by sitting in these convoy zones and wrecking the Italian economy, rather than trying to take the Italian into their fold. It's working out quite well. I just didn't want too many headaches of where the Allied were attacking, which is why in this game I kept them economically damaged. Convoy systems, I love convoy damage. It's a really good idea. Obviously from G40, not from this version, or it's in this version as well, but it's a great idea. Canada are a playable nation. Plays Canadian units where UK units occupied the Canadian home territories, which is up there, way up here somewhere. But also, the Canadians get 2 infantry units up in Scotland, replacing 2 of the British units that are up there. And the ones that were into Egypt that were used to be Anzac, they become Canadians now. And the last thing really with the power section is, if ignited by the Mongolian rule, which is a sensible rule again, Mongolia get 2 cavalry units each in Olgoli and Bryant Uha. Yep, I pronounced that terribly. Their unit profiles are on page 41. It's the same profiles as you use for the Chinese cavalry as well. Other than that, at the bottom of the crib sheet, I have put on a turn sequence. Now, it's the same turn sequence as we had before with G40 and with other games, but I have put it in there because there's a slight subtle change because of the naval blockade and because of the research and development, which is like a pre-turn move. The R&D in this game is really good, very, very well thought out, works very, very sensibly. I've got no criticism of it. I would have. It's not criticism. I really wanted to be able to perhaps do a double buy of IPC's development to speed it up, but it doesn't say that I can do it in the rules. I may think about house ruling that myself later on. But the tech are sensible upgrades, and it's a sensible upgrade system as well. The reason I say with this turn sequence being added onto the bottom of this sheet is because when you come down to step number 3 or phase number 3, conduct combat, you do strategic and tactical bombing first, then your naval blockades. If you understand the blockade rule, you'll understand what I've just said then. If you don't, then it should help you out by a smidgen when you come to play it the first few times. Other than that, there's a reminder on that turn sequence of the German IPC for Argentina, Chile rule, and the Soviet Lend-Lease. That's about all I have to say. So I think it's time to end this video now with one last sort of fly-by look at what's been happening over here. We won't bother with the Pacific side because, well, that's all done and dusted, but it's going to be interesting here, continuing this game way past the general finishing point of BBR, and potentially actually maybe it'll be going too far from the G40 game as well, because it's going to be an Allied victory, I think. But it's nice to play the things out and completely smash Germany out of this game in my own overly dominant fashion, shall we say. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's interesting for you and you can absorb these rules in your own time. Until next time, be cool.